Hello and welcome to another episode of the DVD Graveyard. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn from 1987, directed once again by Sam Raimi. And I think that this is the one, out of the entire franchise, and especially, out of the first trilogy, you could say, I think this is the one that everybody is most people's favorites, really and truly. This is where Evil Dead really kind of started to become Evil Dead, as we would know it later. This is where we start to get that injection of dark comedy, in overdrive in this movie. Because the first movie, it did have some, slight kind of comedy elements to it, but I mean, for the most part, it is a very straightforward horror film. This one, it really went in a kind of almost slapstick direction in some points. Sam Raimi, of course, was a big fan of the Three Stooges, so he kind of incorporated some of that comedy into this film. It is definitely it's a great time. It is a very memorable film. Like I don't know how you couldn't enjoy this film. I love this, the first one as a standalone kind of straightforward horror film. And I love this one also as kind of a standalone horror comedy, which I'll touch more on that in just a minute, kind of what I'm getting into. First, I kind of want to go over a few things, involving the production. I'm not going to delve too deeply on it, just a couple little bits and pieces that I want to mention. So this movie, absolutely, it has a much larger budget, first of all, compared to the first movie. So I think the first movie was $350,000-ish, which is very, very low budget. But they did a great job with what they had. And whereas this movie was backed by Dino De Laurentiis, was one of the I think he was an executive producer on this, and they actually created their own kind of false production company called Rosebud Corporation or Rosebud Productions, something like that, just so that they could release this movie unrated, so it wouldn't get like an X rating or an NC-17 because it is so violent and gory. I mean, the gore is turned up to 11 in this one compared to the first one. And like I said, it has a great effects team going on in this. They were able to do a lot more because the budget of this one was $3.5 million. So they really had, ample more money than they did on the first movie. So this one does feel a lot more well produced compared to the first one. It's still kind of cheesy, and some of the effects are still kind of goofy, in a way. But it's definitely a lot more. It feels like the first film, just a lot more polished, if you will. So, and I'll mention something about that too here in just a moment whenever I talk about the kind of recap at the beginning. So first, I want to read the back of this DVD that I have here. So, like I said, I saw Army of Darkness first, and I think I got that one on DVD first. And then I saw Evil Dead 2 on VHS for the first time. And then I found the first film, years later. But it took me forever to find Evil Dead 2 on DVD for some reason. This is still the original DVD I have here. It's just kind of an Anchor Bay release of it. And this one in particular, like I said, I looked everywhere. I could not find it anywhere. I was looking all over the place, and I finally found it in a pawn shop one day, and I was thrilled. I was like, hell yeah, I finally have it. So I still have this particular copy right here. So I wanted to read the plot synopsis on this, especially because it says something really interesting, which I'll talk about in just a second. So Ash, Bruce Campbell, the sole survivor of the Evil Dead, returns to the same cabin in the woods and again unleashes the forces of the dead. With his girlfriend possessed by demons and his body parts running amok, Ash is forced to single-handedly battle the legions of the damned as the most lethal and groovy hero in horror movie history. So the main reason I wanted to mention that was I think it's funny how the very first line of this movie says the sole survivor of the Evil Dead returns to the same cabin in the woods and again unleashes the forces of the dead. So I think that's funny because if anyone is familiar with these movies, first of all, okay, let me just put it like this. If you've seen the first film and then you watch this one back to back with it, it'll be, you'll notice that it's kind of a straight up remake, as some people would say. And I used to think that too. I used to think that Evil Dead 2 was just a remake of the first film. And I wondered why they did that for a long time. And I finally found out, and I think this is common knowledge now, but for anyone who doesn't know, the second film starts out with Ash goes to the cabin with his girlfriend Linda, and he plays the tapes, that summon the Evil Dead again, and Linda is killed, and she's buried, and she attacks him, and all this other stuff, and we are meant to believe, I guess, if you read the back of this plot synopsis, that Ash was dumb enough to go back to the cabin and do the exact same thing over again, and play the tapes over again and experience this same horror all over again. So the beginning of this really does kind of serve as a little bit of a remake or retelling of the events of the first film. And the reason for that is it was actually supposed to be a recap. So they were unable to get the rights to the first film. Rights issues are always kind of a pain in the ass whenever it comes to certain franchises and films and things. So instead of doing a recap like they wanted to do and re-showing the events of the first movie, they were like, well, let's just retell the events, from but we have a bigger budget this time, so we can make it a little bit more, give a little bit more polish to it. So that's really the reason why. Is it's supposed to be a recap. There's a moment about 7 to 10 minutes, somewhere around in there in the movie, where it does actually pick up directly where the first film left off, where the evil comes up to Ash and picks him up in the air and pushes him through the air, and then of course he lands in the puddle. And he gets up and he's Evil Ash and everything. If you watch it from that moment, so if you skip the whole recap at the beginning and you watch it from that moment, the continuity is still very loose, but it does work better as a sequel rather than just just watching it and being like, oh God, Ash is an idiot. He's doing this again. So, you could do that if you wanted to watch it. I think even Bruce Campbell said, if you want to do it right, that's how you do it. You fast forward that little bit of a recap. I never do, because I actually really like the kind of retelling of the story. Again, it fits really well with the movie. And another thing that you could do is you could actually say that maybe Ash is, and the unreliable narrator trope, where he's telling the same story, but he screws some things up and changes it around, where it's just him and Linda instead of him and the group of friends, because Ash is kind of a screw up, or you could, and that's another thing I like about this is you can, you really could just pick up with this movie and go on from there. You could start here and watch this one all the way through, and then of course watch Army of Darkness, and so on and so forth, and you wouldn't really miss much. But I don't recommend skipping the first movie, because it is really good. I love the first film. So, now that we've addressed that, that's kind of the situation that's going on there. And I'll kind of just segue into that. Like I said, we kind of get the recap, the retelling with Ash and Linda, who I think is Denise Bixler is, I think, her name. So it's a different actress that plays Linda, which would become a recurring thing. And of course she turns evil, and he has to kill her, and he ends up decapitating her with the shovel, just like in the first film. And she comes back to life and attacks him, and she bites him on the hand, and they kind of throw around the cabin, and then he ends up he finally does kill her, whenever he takes her out to the shed and cuts her up with the chainsaw. And this is honestly kind of my favorite part of the movie is the very beginning of this, because it's literally just the first quarter of this movie, give or take, is just Ash in the cabin, losing his mind. He sees himself in the mirror, and he ends up talking to himself through the mirror, and his hand goes crazy, so it gets all infected, so he has to cut his hand off, and his hand is running around the cabin after it's and it beats the shit out of him, and then it's running around the cabin, and he has to basically fight it, and we get some great visual gags in that little instance there. So I love all that, and then the part where of course the deer head starts laughing and the whole cabin is laughing, and he's just losing his damn mind. Like, I mean, it's so fun. Just this little part with Ash just kind of by himself in the cabin. It's so fun. Like I said, that whole just watching Bruce Campbell do all this crazy shit. And yeah, so I really like this first kind of quarter of the film, if you will. So, shortly after that, after we've gone through all of this kind of situation, that is whenever we meet Annie, who is played by Sarah Berry. And she is the daughter of Professor Noby, who owns this cabin. Him and, that owns the cabin that Ash is in originally. And it was his voice that we heard on the tapes. And then, of course, she comes up there with Richard Domier, I think is his name. He plays Ed, which is kind of her fiance or boyfriend or colleague or whatever. And they are coming to the cabin because they have some pages of the Necronomicon that were left out, or that they found later, or whatever have you. And they're going to go there to meet her father, Professor Noby, and who is also there with Henrietta, which is his wife. They go there to basically translate these pages. So when Annie and Ed get to the cabin, they get to the bridge, and they see that the bridge is still destroyed, much like in the first movie. And then they meet Dan Hicks, who plays Jake, and then Cassie DePaiva, I think is how you say her name, who plays Bobby Joe. And they're just these kind of these hillbilly types that they run into that are going to take them on this kind of trail to the cabin, because of course the bridge is destroyed. And so once they get to the cabin, and again, we get some more scenes with Ash just kind of losing his mind. When they get there, they go inside. Ash actually shoots Bobby Joe in the shoulder through the door because he just hears a noise outside, and he, of course, thinks it's the evil, which is understandable. And so when they get there, they walk inside and they just see that the cabin is completely destroyed. Ash is there by himself, of course. There's just stuff everywhere. There's blood all over the place. They see the chainsaw, which is still on the floor from when Ash cut his hand off earlier in the film. So they assume that Ash has murdered Annie's parents. And so they grab him and they kind of kick the shit out of him, and then they throw him into the cellar. And so Ash is now locked in the cellar, much like Cheryl was in the first film. He's kind of stuck down there for a little bit. So while this new group is kind of around the cabin trying to kind of figure out what's going on, they find the player that has the tape on it with Professor Noby, and they play it. And that's whenever Professor Noby says that he had been translating the Necronomicon, and it unleashed the evil, and it attacked it possessed his wife Henrietta, and that he had to bury Henrietta in the cellar. So Ash is like, oh shit, because he's locked down there with her. And that is whenever we are introduced to Henrietta, the Deadite Henrietta, played by Ted Raimi, who is in pretty much, I think, everything that Sam Raimi has done off the top of my head. I love Ted Raimi. He's fucking crazy, and he's great in this movie. I mean, he's something else. I love Ted Raimi. And he is excellent at Henrietta. I think Henrietta is the best Deadite in this entire film. When they realize that, kind of what's going on, they finally do let Ash out of the basement. And they trap Henrietta back down there. And of course, we get that great scene where Henrietta's head kind of sticks out of the cellar, and they shut the cellar door on Henrietta's head, and her eyeball pops out and flies across the room and lands in Bobby Joe's mouth. That's a great little sequence. And so basically, once they lock her down there, Ash kind of gives them the rundown of what's going on. He tells them kind of, he gives them the kind of the rundown on what has been happening at this cabin. So after that, at one point or another, I can't remember how exactly off the top of my head, but Ed becomes possessed, and Ash dismembers him with an axe. And then, kind of around this time, they're kind of looking through the pages of the Necronomicon, and they see that there's a passage in there where it actually shows Ash in the Necronomicon. Of course we know it is him, and it's kind of foreshadowing to the ending of what's gonna kind of come later in this film. So Professor Noby actually manifests as a ghost, and he's talking to them and telling them kind of what's going on and how to defeat the evil, and that they need to translate these pages because it will help them put the evil back to sleep, and it will open a portal and suck the evil up into it. And at this time, Ash's severed hand is still running around the cabin, and Bobby Joe, she freaks out because the severed hand is holding Ash's hand. Or I'm sorry, Ash's severed hand is holding Bobby Joe's hand. So it freaks her out, and she runs out into the woods. And of course, she is attacked by the trees, much like Cheryl was in the first film. And she's ultimately killed off screen. We don't really see it, viscerally, or we don't see it on screen, but that's what happens. And of course, at this point, Jake is wanting to go out and look for Bobby Joe, and they're telling him, that's a bad idea. We can't do that. We're not. She's dead. You might as well forget about it. And Jake is like, I'm not having this shit. We're going out to find her. So he holds them at gunpoint, and he walks them outside, and he's yelling out into the woods, Bobby Joe, Bobby Joe, and the whole time we're getting the POV shot of the evil coming towards them. And it possesses Ash, and we get the second evil Ash sequence. So, and Ash looks really fucking cool too whenever he becomes possessed. He's very scary. I think the makeup looks great on Bruce Campbell. It's just really cool. So Ash is possessed, and he basically starts to attack them. He chases them, around the cabin. Jake and Annie kind of split up, and Annie goes back in the cabin, and she's hiding from Ash, and she accidentally stabs Jake with the Kandarian dagger because he scares the shit out of her and surprises her. And then this is another great sequence too. Whenever she drags him back inside the cabin after she's stabbed him, he gets a little too close to the cellar, and Henrietta pulls him into the cellar, and we just get this fountain of blood that sprays out. It looks like fucking Hawaiian Punch. It's just this bright red blood, and there's so much of it. That's a great little. It always made me laugh. Like, even whenever I was younger and I watched that always cracked me up. Just the way that he's killed. Like, there's just so much blood. So he's killed, and Ash is about to kill Annie, or he's about to possess her, or whatever he plans on doing. And he sees the necklace in the floor that he gave to Linda at the beginning of this movie. It's the same necklace from the first film. And it's on the floor in the kind of skull shape that, again, was also from the first film. And he finds the necklace, and that makes him, he turns back human, into regular Ash. And, of course, Annie attacks him because she thinks he's still evil, and she's gonna fuck his day up. And so he tells her, they have a little scuffle. He's like, I'm all right. So they decide that their best option at this point is to go, they have to go down into the cellar, because before they went out to, yell for Bobby Joe, Jake took the pages of the Necronomicon that they were looking over, and he threw them down into the cellar. So they have to go down into the cellar to get them. And this is probably my favorite scene in the entire movie, is whenever they go out to the shed, and they're, Ash is working on the chainsaw, and it's all these Sam Raimi style really quick cuts, and he fastens the chainsaw to his hand, so he now has the iconic chainsaw arm, and saws off the shotgun, and now he is He is Ash, the way that we know him to be. And we get the great line where the camera zooms up to his face and we get the groovy, So Ash is in full swing now. And that's one thing I really like about Ash in this film. So in the first movie, I think I said this in my previous review, Ash really was not, starting out, was not the main character. He's just kind of the one that got lucky. At the beginning of this, or at the beginning of the original one, he really was kind of a coward. Like, he was in the background, sort of. He wasn't this cool, wisecracking, hard ass dude like he is in this movie. So I really like that they did that. They made, and Bruce Campbell is such a great actor. I can't imagine Ash being played by anybody else. This is Bruce Campbell's character. I mean, 100%. Like, I don't think you could do Ash as anybody else. Personally, I just think that this character was made for Bruce Campbell, for sure. So, like I said, Ash is now in full swing. He wants to go, he's going to go down in the cellar to carve himself a witch. And I like this scene a lot too, where he's down in the basement looking for the pages, and it's all dark, and he's, the chainsaw is just kind of idling as he's walking around. Ultimately, he finds all the pages. He throws them up to Annie, and he is attacked by Henrietta. And they come back upstairs, and they're kind of duking it out a little bit. And of course, we get the great scene where Henrietta transforms into the long giraffe neck creature thing, making the monkey sounds. And Ash decapitates Henrietta and blows the head. He shoots the head. And the whole time, Annie is reading the passages from the Necronomicon, from these pages. And the first thing it does is it makes the evil take physical form. So that's when we get the badass, really cool, I think it's called the Rotten Apple Head monster is what they call it. But it's this giant monster head that flies through the door and grabs Ash. And of course there's trees and branches and all kinds of shit coming through the cabin, and the wind's blowing, and Ash is fighting it, right in its face, and he's like stabbing it in the eye with the chainsaw. And Annie is just over there still reciting this incantation. And when, during all of this, before she can finish completely, she is stabbed with the Kandarian dagger by Ash's severed hand. And, you think all hope is lost while Ash is still sitting there fighting this monster head. And so just as Annie is about to die, she's kind of fading out, she finishes the last part of the incantation, and a portal opens up, and it starts to suck all the evil back into this portal. But it also pulls Ash into this portal. And he goes through the portal. We get a bunch of really trippy looking stuff, and he falls out, and he lands in medieval times, and he's surrounded by knights, and he's attacked by a flying deadite, and he kills it. And of course we zoom out, and he's, he knows he's screwed up, because, how's he going to get home now? He's just screaming, no, no, as they're all bowing before him and calling him the chosen one and everything else. So then we cut to black, and we get credits. And that is Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, which of course will segue directly into Army of Darkness with that ending. It's just a little bit different. Again, the continuity is very loose in the Evil Dead franchise. This is a very fun, awesome, gory, violent, goofy movie. I highly recommend it. It is definitely one of my not just one of my favorite sequels in this franchise, but it's one of my favorite sequels of all time. It's just such a great film. It's ridiculous. It's comedic. I mean, I love it. And like I said before, I personally like this because I think that you could really start with this movie if you wanted to. If for whatever reason, the first one is not your cup of tea, or it doesn't sound like it's your cup of tea from what you've read, you very well could jump in right with Evil Dead 2, and it will give you everything that you need to know kind of going into this. Of course, we do always kind of get a recap at the beginning of the movies, but this one, like I said, you could look at this as the first film in a way if you want to. But I don't think it should be. I don't think the first one should be skipped whatsoever. I do think that movie's great in its own right. But I just look at them as completely different movies, personally. I mean, they're very different, a different style of movie, but that's, again, just my personal opinion. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review of Evil Dead 2. Definitely a great time. Highly recommend it. I look forward to talking about Army of Darkness, and then I think we'll take a little bit of a break on Evil Dead for a little while. And then, I'll try to get back to Alien. And then there's a couple other films that I really want to talk about, just kind of standalone films. But anyway, we will get there when we get there. So anyway, as always, have a great night. I hope you enjoyed the review, and good night.